Dilam Shidobis, good morning. Thank you very much for the organizers. I have been through this conference from yesterday, and I was very impressed by the quality of discussion and debates. And I hope we will continue on this level than yesterday. And today we have a very interesting discussion on the deeper engagement with the EU and what are the realities, prospects, and modalities. I have a very distinguished panel, again, thank you very much to the organizers, because we have member states, the states that want to be the members, and the states that want closer partnerships as well. We will, I think before I introduce the panelists, I just wanted to start with the ambition that Georgia has, and it's about going back to the family. That's how it's interpreted, I think, in Georgia, going to the back to European family, which means, and also transforming the country and transforming society, the governance, but also the business. Because we had to build this over the last 25 years. And I think this is how also Moldova feels. Our closest neighbor, Azerbaijan, also is going through this process. Also, we're looking at the perspective of deeper integration with EU from different perspectives. And on every level, whether we're transformed, we are getting back to the family, or we want to change the everyday life of our citizens so that the country, our societies are more inclusive and we have more prosperity. We need to go through everyday homework, and that which means reforms in all the directions, and that's where we really need the new modalities, new partnerships that will help us to go through these changes. And when we're translating these reforms into the people, there is overall very big support to European integration in Georgia, and we have mentioned that also it's coming down maybe from 80 to 70, but it's really very high. And the demand in the population to learn more about the European integration is very high. And when you ask the citizens, it's not about that I want to become the member of the EU or be part of the family. They really see the reforms that are going under the umbrella of European integration as something that is changing their lives. And they expect to get more information and be part of these changes, both on the social side, but also on the economic side. And Euro Foundation that I present, every 2 years we do this survey of the population. And one of the questions of the issues that they want to learn more, and recently we saw this, more than 50% wants to learn more about the very specific instruments. And for example, trade or social assistance program in the EU. So this is, I think, where we need, both in terms of partnership and in terms of the local transformation, we need specific instruments, we need specific modalities that we can be part of, so that different interest groups in the country feel that they're part of this change, they're part of this process. This is about Georgia, but this is how I also see that the changes that are happening in Moldova, and we also have the Partner Foundation in Moldova, and we're hearing through the polls also the same demand from the population. With Azerbaijan, I think there is less demand for the being part of the bigger European family, but still there is a very realistic, I think, the vision of what the partnership should entail. So we'll hear about this as well. And then we have the member states that I hope will talk about what instruments work for them. And one other thing that I also want to discuss, not the instruments that are already in place, but something like new instrument, new modalities that we'll consider for the states like Georgia or Moldova that want to be eventually be members of the EU, but at this point the doors are not open. But this opportunity can arise at any moment, so that we're ready for this, and again, not just for the integration, for the being part of the family, but also for the local people. So I will stop here, and I would want to introduce my panelists. Again, I was very much impressed by the bios that I won't read for you, because they're politicians, but at the same time, I've seen that many of them been through academia, did the academic work, but they also been worked on the international relations for the government on different, and they're part of different, even now they're part of different groups, international groups. So they are the ones who will, they are the real experts. So the first I want to introduce Mr. Sergi Kapanadze, who is Deputy Chairperson of the Parliament of Georgia, and he represents the opposition party. Sergi.
Thank you, Katie. Is the mic on? Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Katie. It's an honor to be at this conference and to be talking about the perspectives of Georgia's integration into the European Union, about the issues such as what are the next steps in our relations with the EU. And I think in the last 15 years, there have been two critical juncture points in the relations between Georgia and the European Union. The first one came in 2004, when the EU created the neighborhood policy and offered the action plans, which were basically the first roadmap for reforms for the countries like Georgia. And that framework, in its efficient stage, lasted more or less 5 years. And then there was another critical juncture point in 2009, which was the Eastern Partnership. And that one created some solid instruments for the further integration, such as the association agreements, the CFTAs, visa liberalization processes, institutional development, and that is where we are right now. I'm a strong believer in the principle of juncture point in general. I think what we need right now is the next juncture point where there is another critical turn towards further European integration. Now, the question is what is that, and what kind of model can we be talking about? I think that we need not invent a bicycle. There is a more or less successful instrument which is used quite well, quite fruitfully by the Balkan states, and that is called right now the instrument of pre-accession, IPA. Now, some might not like the name accession in it, but it's not about the name, it's about the form, it's about the substance, it's not about the form. So what I would say is that the next thing that the Eastern Partnership countries should get is something similar to the instrument of pre-accession. Once again, there I would leave the question unanswered whether that should include the clear promise of membership or not, because we all know that IPA is based on that membership perspective. Obviously, I'm a strong believer that Georgia should be given a clear membership perspective, just like Moldova and Ukraine. But it's not really about that political statement, whether the Article 49 applies to Georgia in this particular case or not. It's not about that clear statement. It's about the instrument. I think that what IPA offers to the Balkan states is something that a similar instrument could be devised and also offered to the countries of the Eastern Partnership, and in this particular case, Georgia. Now, what exactly is the IPA that I think are important under the IPA that I think could be applied to the case of the Eastern Partner countries? Well, first of all, it is the more robust development program. I wouldn't use the word assistance because it's not really about the money. It's about which areas are singled out as the priorities for development. And as I understand, the Balkan IPA it has different dimensions, but some of the strong areas where the focus is made is, first of all, the regional development. In a way, preparing these countries how to absorb the structural funds or the regional funds when they become the members of the European Union. I believe that is one area where Georgia still needs further progress and assistance from the side of the European Union. The other one is obviously the agriculture. If you look at the numbers, once again, without going into the concrete details, but if you look at the numbers even from a shallow perspective, one would see that Albania gets about twice as much assistance. And once again, it's not really about the amount of money, it's about where that money is being spent. So in Albania's case, the numbers are about twice as much as in the case of Georgia. In the case of Serbia, which is maybe 2 times bigger than Georgia, the numbers are about 5 times bigger. So it's obviously a format which provides for more focus on the particular areas, such as the regions, such as the agriculture, and obviously with a more robust funding. The other area there, which also has been declared as a priority in our relations with the European Union by the government of Georgia and Moldova and Ukraine, is ability to participate in different programs and agencies. And if you look at the list is quite impressive. And even though our participation in these programs and agencies increases from year to year, starting from the education programs, ending with the others, still there is a number of other programs which are not open to the countries of the Eastern Partnership in a similar way that they are open to the countries of the Balkans. Now, that means that, and that obviously is something that could resonate well with some of the ideas which have been mentioned also here in this conference by some of our colleagues. Yesterday there was a discussion by former Prime Minister of Lithuania about Mr. Kubilius, about the so-called new Marshall Plan or the new assistance program for Ukraine, which mainly, as I understand, focuses on the investments and on kind of pouring, in a way, more resources into the development of the countries of the Eastern Partnership. And that obviously uses the European Investment Bank as one of the main instruments. But here, this all together, in a way, would imply that what we could get as a next step is the further upgraded involvement of the European Union financially, as well as program-wise, with the focus on the concrete regions and on the agriculture. At the same time, I want to say that I'm also a strong believer of conditionality. And I mean strong conditionality. Because as we move forward, I think these things need to be based on concrete conditions which the European Union sets out for Georgia. So as we open some of these new chapters in our relations with the European Union, we also at the same time, or before that, close some of the, let's say, sad chapters in our history, such as the chapters of political persecution, and we all know that now the Strasbourg court has confirmed that the Article 18 has been violated with a former Georgian prime minister. There has been also some new arrests, such as Mr. Oniani, which is widely perceived to be also a political prisoner. So closing some chapters which are not conducive to the European integration, I think is essential as we move forward. But also the other things, such as the ones that might not be so politicized in the internal discourse here, but which are important for the institutional development, such as the bigger role of the parliament in the oversight of the government, especially in the countries which have parliamentary republics or have the declared parliamentary republics, like the case in Georgia, which so it's one thing what is on the paper, the other thing what's actually the reality. So this strengthening of institutions where the parliament plays a strong role, where the opposition is able to grill the government when there are questions, where there is the structural, formal process which leads to the democratic institutions being strengthened, I think these are the essential things at the same time or in parallel to these new steps towards the European Union. And the final point, so if you ask me by 2020, some of these things should be in place. And if you ask me what is the successful year of 2020 in terms of the European integration from the Georgia's perspective, I would say that, first of all, it would be the new format which we might have by that time, even thinking about launching the application of membership, even though this might be an unpopular idea, but at least having a roadmap, which, by the way, the government yesterday said that they are working on it, and we fully support it, because that's a good idea, that Georgia has the roadmap towards accession, which could involve the declaration that we want to join the European Union, and even thinking about, maybe together with our colleagues from Moldova and Ukraine, applying whenever there is a right time, but not being shy of talking about this loudly, because I think without talking about this, we will not move forward. In 2020, what I would be looking forward is not having the next association agenda that we just received right now until 2020, but maybe having a new type of agenda from 2020, which is about the pre-accession, or once again, I leave the definition of the words to you, but which implies an upgrade, a qualitative upgrade of relations between Georgia and the European Union. Also, by 2020, I hope that there will be the new European Commission, which, unlike the current Commission, is not so averse towards the idea of enlargement. We know that Commissioner Juncker has said, and it has been one of his major kind of ideas, that there will be no enlargement during his commission. So I hope that when the next commission is in place, that will not be such a major policy thing for the European Union, that yes, from 2020 to 2019 onwards, there will be no new steps towards the enlargement. And at the same time, I think that by 2020, these issues that I've talked about, such as once again, the dark chapters, which I think has been taking place in the history of my country, will be closed. The issues of political prisoners, the issues of the weakness of the institutions, the issues linked to the informal governance, because having these problems and at the same time leaping forward with the European Union, I think is not going to happen. So as we move forward, hopefully with a stronger conditionality on the side of the European Union and with the concrete proposals, with the concrete measures, which once again I put under the auspices of the new IPA for this region, I think that we can really upgrade our relations and then maybe even think about, in the nearest future, becoming the applicant countries and joining the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergi. And now I would like to ask Mr. Lupu, who represents Moldova at the EuroNest Parliamentary Assembly, and he's also a co-president of the Assembly.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair of this panel. First of all, let me welcome all of participants to this very interesting and very important conference, and let me appreciate highly the initiative of the organizers of this conference. Indeed, very interesting and important talks yesterday and today, and I'm absolutely convinced that this conference will provide all of us, and each of us, with important added value for our countries in promoting further on the policies related to EU integration of our countries. Okay, I'm speaking now on behalf of the Republic of Moldova, but in the meantime, as co-president of the Parliamentary Assembly of EuroNest, bearing in mind the generic of the topic of this panel, I will start by saying that the most important thing that we should look at is that the countries, and we're speaking about the countries of Eastern Partnership, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia, Moldova, Ukraine, Belarus. If 8 years ago, when the Eastern Partnership has been set, all the countries have been more or less homogeneous, with regard to their strategic view to EU, their relations with European Union, and Eastern Partnership was conceived as a kind of regional view, regional approach for cooperation, not for accession, not for integration. Now, let's admit one reality, that 8 years after, the situation changed dramatically. Countries are not anymore homogeneous, at least concerning their strategic views towards EU. What do I mean by saying that? The regional approach as the basic principle which the Eastern Partnership is based on doesn't exclude, in fact, individual approach. We should recognize and we should respect the sovereign right of every country concerning their priorities for domestic as well as for foreign policies. Like that, what we have as final product, up to date, we have Azerbaijan with its own strategic view regarding the present and its future and its relations with European Union. It's absolutely understandable for me. This is the priority of the country. We respect this priority. The interest of Azerbaijan in getting the status of candidate or full-fledged member state is not present and will never be, because this is the strategy of the country. We have Armenia. that signed recently an enhanced partnership agreement with European Union, being also in the meantime member of Euro-Asian Customs Union, for quite understandable reasons of national interest. And we have three countries, Georgia, Ukraine, and Moldova, signing association agreements, getting free visa regime. But the most important thing is the common platform and a common view of this group of three countries. They have officially, openly declared their strategic interest of acceding to European Union. So we have a quite different picture in front of us right now. Why it is important to say that? It's important to speak about that. And I'm very glad that one of the emphases of the last Eastern Partnership Summit in Brussels, 24th of November, put the emphasis on differentiation. Because in the future, since right now, we have different strategies, I mean different countries, different strategies. We have to have the possibility of good cohabitation inside Eastern Partnership, but in the meantime, we should understand that we have different ways and will need different instruments for developing our relations with European Union. This is why during Moldovan co-presidency to Parliamentary Assembly of EuroNest, with the support of all Eastern partners, and I would like to thank all the countries for the support accorded to this idea, we have set a new working group, a new autonomous platform inside Eastern Partnership Parliamentary Dimension, the so-called 3AA working group. This is a working group including three countries that have signed association agreements. And on our proposal, Madam Tamar Khulordova was appointed as co-chair of this working group. I'm very glad to welcome her, as well as Claire Moody, another co-chair representing the S&D political group. By the way, this is a very unique case. This is the only internal structure of Parliamentary Assembly of EuroNest having three co-chairs, because usually we have two co-chairs. Why three? Because two of them are representing European Parliament. Claire representing S&D, and her colleague, our colleague, representing EPP political group. You can feel the very high level of interest and high level of political involvement coming from European Parliament, and I'm very glad that we have such a situation. So, why this group has been set? If you will look carefully at the joint declaration of the Eastern Partnership Summit, you will find out in the paragraph number 20, by the end, a very clear reference to this working group made by chief of states and governments, saying that the summit acknowledged the creation of this group through the decision of the Bureau of the Parliamentary Assembly. Politically, it's extremely important for us because like that, this differentiation, this platform was acknowledged, meaning that this new platform, why was the philosophy while launching the idea of this group and when creating this group, to set a common platform for the countries with the same aspirations, to have the possibility of making an exchange of informations, to coordinate a number of policies and actions. As example, I can provide you with a joint address before the summit, a joint address signed by three speakers of three parliaments, Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia. But I believe that such a coordinating position should be put on the permanent basis because we'll have a lot of things to do together. Yes, we'll have an internal competition, but politically it is in our interest to join our efforts in the dialogue with European Union, and instead of having one voice, having three voices, claiming for the next progress in our political, economical relations regarding the integration process itself. In the meantime, understanding that the existing formula of Eastern Partnership, I'm repeating again, was not conceived as a platform for integration, as just a platform for cooperation. Respecting the sovereign rights of our partners, other Eastern partners, in the meantime, we need to use this platform through this group in order to come to a new format in the future, of course, concerning the enlargement, concerning the status of candidate countries. Now, while speaking about instruments, my colleague mentioned 3 times, I counted. It is not about money, it is not about assistance, I would say it is about. It is about political integration, it is about economic integration, social integration, etc. And those processes, they have rather high costs. Why? Because we need to adjust our economic system, the standards of our enterprises, the standards of our products, infrastructure, to the European ones. This is a lasting process, and obviously we'll be much more successful in doing that, having the instruments that will assist our countries in adjusting our social systems, political, democratic, economical system. Due to this assistance, we will be able to make much important progress and to get much more serious results. I will provide you with just a couple of examples reflecting the case of the Republic of Moldova. Some basic things, energy sector. In our case, we have been during decades, have been linked just to one gas supplier, Gazprom. So, one supplier, it means monopoly. But one supplier, besides just the economic sense of monopoly, is very dangerous from the political point of view. This is why we have set as priority the diversification, the identification of an alternative supplier in order to have a margin of maneuver and a freedom for our choice. With EU assistance, EU, European Investment Bank, European programs of financial and technical assistance, we have started, and I believe at latest end of next year or beginning of 2019, Moldova will get connected to the European network of gas pipelines through Romania. Why it is so important, dear colleagues? I believe I should not lose my time in order to explain. It doesn't mean that once this connection will be finalized, it doesn't mean that we'll not buy Russian gas and we'll buy only gas of other origin. Of course not. This is the purely economic approach. We'll see from which direction the price is most convenient for Moldova. This is very good for our economy. This is very good for our citizens, the final consumers of this product. But politically, it's extremely important for us to have the choice, to have a diversification of the sources of supply. The same for electricity. The Moldovan, our own capacity of generation could ensure at maximum 30% of the total consumption of energy on Moldovan market. 70% more or less is imported from Ukraine. Again, with some quite difficult situations in the neighbor country, we believe that their internal need in electricity increased, their capacities of exporting electricity decreased. Of course, the same through a number of important financial programs and financial assistance of European Union, we are getting connected closer, okay, from the technical point of view, to the European network of electricity. So it is about assistance. It is about investments. First, that we need investments. I'm very satisfied that the joint declaration of the summit included this idea of creating a new European fund for investments dedicated to Eastern partners, I believe, okay, Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova. It is not mentioned in a very open way that it will be a kind of Marshall Plan fund, but this is just the beginning, and this was a very important political decision. And I believe that by joining the efforts, I mean, 3 association countries will be able to ensure the access of the associated countries to the new instruments, new tools, new funds, those that are dedicated to the pre-accession countries. Of course, not in 1 year, perhaps not in 2 years. We should be very realistic. We should not dream. We should work, because EU integration is not about nice and frequent political declarations. EU integration is, first of all, very hard from day-to-day work in transforming all the sectors of the public life in our countries in conformity with new standards. In the case of Moldova, everything we are doing as reforms, judiciary, police, economy, social, etc., sectors reforms, we are not doing that for making pleasure to EU institutions. We are doing that because we are convinced that those reforms will bring us some new, much more performant models that will be efficient and will bring results for our citizens, for their health care, for the human rights, for the development of the society as a whole. So, as Madam Moderator is providing me with some signals that it's time to stop, I will respect this request. I will stop here, because for sure we'll have enough time after my colleagues will talk to participate to debates and discussions. Thank you very much.
Time for the audience also to participate and ask questions, so you can respond. So I also want to introduce Mr. Vigenin, who is the chairperson of the Committee on European Affairs and Oversight of the European Funds of National Assembly of the Republic of Bulgaria. And I think it's very important for us, the countries that aspire to become the members, to learn from the relatively recent members, because as far as I know, it's almost 11 years that Bulgaria became the member of the EU.
Well, thank you, Ms. Vashakidze. I think we need to leave probably a bit more time and space for discussion, because the topic is very interesting, and it's an area where we could have a lot of exchange and ideas how we can work on this issue from now on, because it's something in development. But before that, before I say a few words on this topic, I would like to congratulate Georgia. I've realized that it's exactly 20 years since my first visit to Tbilisi and Georgia. At that time, I was an activist of a youth organization, and through the years, I could see the changes in the country and in the capital as well. And I can say that maybe you living here, you can't notice it really, but it's amazing what you have achieved in a very difficult environment when it comes to economy, also security. And I have the chance to work also actively in the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, so I know very well your difficulties from this point of view, and the fact that despite that you were able to achieve so much is really something that we should honor. So thank you for the invitation as well, because I think it's very important to be able to exchange ideas and experience, especially now after the Eastern Partnership Summit. I'm one of the people who advocate giving EU perspective to the Eastern Partnership countries from the very beginning, initially as member of European Parliament, now as member of the National Parliament of Bulgaria. At the same time, I think we need to be very careful, and it's a huge responsibility on the side of the Eastern Partnership countries' politicians, including Georgia, not to create too high expectations, to base also internal political messages on realities within the EU, and to manage the expectations, because we also had this problem when we were preparing for the membership. The expectations were very high. People believe that joining the EU will suddenly create wealth and prosperity for everyone, and of course this could not happen. It did not happen, especially not that quickly. I think we see the same phenomenon here as well. I mean, every time countries ask and expect more from the European Union that it is possible to be delivered right now, especially with regard to possible EU perspective. And then there is certain disappointment. I mean, we have to take into account what is the situation in the EU, the fact that it is going through, before that through a crisis, now through certain, I would call it transformation. It's trying to find its way, new, I'd say, new form, new way of functioning, new purpose. And in these periods of internal transformation, it's very difficult to open too much the door for other countries to join. And we have this problem with the Western Balkans right now. Bulgarian presidency will try to focus a bit more on the Western Balkans, which already have the EU perspective. And the messages we hear from a number of countries, member states, I mean, are not very positive. That's why I think we need to find the best way to move forward, not to ask for too much with regard to political commitments, which is a bit more difficult, and sometimes it can hardly be explained to the citizens of some of the member states. But I think our approach, and it's linked to the topic we have today, should be to do our best to make Eastern Partnership countries as much as possible linked to the EU and also interlinked, so that at a certain moment the membership itself will become a very natural step. I mean, let's make these countries part of the EU before they're actually politically part of EU. Which means that step by step we should increase the involvement of these countries in all the policies, or at least all the important policies of the EU, a process which has already started, but it should be accelerated. It started with the signature and entry into force of the deep and comprehensive free trade area agreements with 3 of the Eastern Partnership countries, which would mean that once they're fully implemented, which is a long process, by the way, and needs a lot of work on the side of Eastern partners, would make these countries' economies literally part of the single market, to high extent, let's say, not fully, but to high extent. Then it would make these economies much more competitive and much easier to integrate fully than once the countries, I believe, will become part of the EU one day. The same goes, Marian Lupu mentioned the energy policy of the European Union and the fact that the countries now have the possibility and the prospect to become part of the energy systems of the European Union. Of course, it takes time, investment, money, but still it's an option which is extremely important, because energy security or higher energy independence gives, of course, much more freedom to these countries to make their political choices as well. And I know well what I mean, because it concerns also a number of the Southeastern European member states and future member states from the Western Balkans. Same goes if we talk about road infrastructure, railroad infrastructure. We should also talk about, as we try to invent this word and policy, digital connectivity of these countries with the European Union and between themselves. I mean, to make also the next step in integrating with the EU before actually politically are part of the EU. So looking also through the lens of the latest Eastern Partnership declaration which came out of the summit and the 20 deliverables until 2020, I think the area of future work in the several years to come is very wide, and if ambition is high, then you can achieve a lot. On the financial side and generally, because I've mentioned the EU, I'm not going into details because our next panel is about the future of EU. But we have, I fully agree with Marian Lupu that finally, whatever we talk about, it's a matter of money. When we discuss the policies of the EU in the next financial framework, shall we have a strong cohesion policy? What's going to happen with the agricultural policy, regional policy of the EU? The money related to building infrastructure, especially in the countries which still are lagging behind, mainly Central and Southeastern Europe. If we talk about social policies of the EU, I mean, these are important policies. They're recognized as important by the citizens, but at the same time, they cost a lot of money. And now with Brexit, with the difficulties within some member states to invest more, let's say, invest in the EU budget, we may face difficulties and we'll have to face certain choices. And it's again also about how much money and what kind of policies will be supported through the instrument of pre-accession assistance. What would be the funds dedicated to the neighborhood instrument, which is available, can be changed. Now is the time to discuss what kind of neighborhood instrument this could be. Of course, pre-accession cannot be open now to Eastern partners, but neighborhood instruments, especially the part which is related to the Eastern neighbors, can be changed in a way that it can become very similar to the pre-accession instrument. But all this should be followed closely by you as well, and you should have your input in this process. From that point of view, I could say that, for example, the participation or the active work of the EuroNest Parliamentary Assembly, and I'm happy to see that it is active and delivering important messages, is one element, because their national parliaments of the Eastern Partnership countries cooperate closely with the parliaments, with the European Parliament. But I, now being chair of the European Affairs Committee of the National Parliament of Bulgaria, I realize the importance also of the interaction which is going on through the so-called COSAC meetings. These are the meetings of the committees of European integration of the member states. So I would propose, since these committees are open also to participation of the Eastern Partnership countries, if they wish so, I'll send a letter next week to all of them to explain the procedure and how this can happen. But I really strongly urge these committees to participate, to follow the discussions that are going on at the level of national parliaments. They're able to present their views to these meetings. And since many decisions are finally taken also at national level, national parliaments level, national governments level, also including Eastern Partnership and enlargement, it is very important that you become part of these discussions, even politically, before you are actually members of the European Union. I will finish by saying that now with Bulgaria taking the presidency of the Council in the next 6 months, I myself will do my best to work in the direction to further strengthen the commitments of the EU at parliamentary level, but also at governmental level and the Council to what has been decided in Brussels a few weeks ago. And I hope that we can stay in close coordination on all issues that you feel can be made better, can be decided in favor of the future common work between Eastern partners and European Union, and on all policies that now are being revised or developed so that you can have your input and participation when these policies are decided, so that you are not just countries that will benefit or will follow certain policies, but that you are already participating in developing these policies. I think this is extremely important to change the way you see the cooperation between EU and Eastern partners. It's not one-sided. It should be a real common work on these issues. And it is happening already, but what depends on us will be to strengthen this process so that you feel equal when you come to our meetings, even if you are still not able to vote. Thank you.
Very much. Our next speaker is Mr. Seyidov, who is the Chairman of International Relations and Interparliamentary Relations of Milli Majlis of the Republic of Azerbaijan. And I think as for Georgians, it's very important that our neighbors also ally with us in terms of the partnerships and in terms of the work that we do in the region and in the larger region. So, floor is yours.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. And of course, on my behalf, I also want to express my gratitude to organizers for this excellent conference. Very important in time to think together where we are, in which direction we should go, what kind of initiatives we should accept. And from this point of view, I think especially the title of the conference is a unique one and very important one: Unity in Diversity. Diversity is one of the core values which we can see especially within the Europe. As you can see, I have mentioned Europe, not European Union, because there is a quite difference between institution and the idea of Europe. And that's why I want to bring a small clarification. Azerbaijan has strategic goal to go to Europe since the first democratic republic, which destroyed by Bolsheviks at the beginning of the last century. We have, and we will do our best in order to promote the idea of Europe. And the vast majority of our projects, which were already done and which we are going to do, close connected with Europe. How can we do that? Together with our partners, friends. Baku, Tbilisi, Ceyhan, Turkey. Baku, Tbilisi, Erzurum. Baku, Tbilisi, Kars, the railway which just recently has opened by 3 leaders of the nations, which is another great opportunity to bring Europe to our region, to bring our region closer to Europe. TAP, Trans-Adriatic pipeline. TANAP, Trans-Anatolian pipeline. South Gas corridor, and all other initiatives. All these projects we're doing together with our friends for Europe and bringing Europe to our region, to our countries. Let's be very frank and sincere. I think that this very specific way of cooperation between the European states, for time being, could be estimated as a priority for Azerbaijan. And we, my committee, for example, my parliament, already ratified 10 bilateral strategic agreements with European Union member states. And the last one, we just recently, a week ago, ratified with Latvia, and I want to express my gratitude to my Latvian friends. They have signed the same agreement in June 2017, in accordance with all rules and demands of the European Union. And my question is, if Azerbaijan is able to sign 10 bilateral strategic partnership agreements far away from European Union, or we're close? I think not so far. This is just another angle. And we are coming to the Europe with our contribution. We are investing in Europe by billions of dollars. And we are today able to build, and this project is being built, the alternative security pipelines for Europe. It means we are bringing security, we are bringing our heritage to Europe. I think that today Azerbaijan is really doing its best, not only for Azerbaijan, but can show how can we cooperate with neighboring countries, first of all with Georgia and Turkey, and at the same time can bring new vision, new input to the cooperation with European institutions. I am really very in line with the statement which my very respectable friend from Ukraine yesterday, Mr. Tarasyuk, said. Of course, we should do some homework. And we should do a lot, fighting against corruption, good governance, to create the normal, acceptable for the rest of the institutions, environment, etc. But again, let's be frank. For time has come to think that not only Eastern Partnership countries or Azerbaijan should do this homework. The same homework is very essential for European institutions itself. We already been a part of Europe, part of Union, sorry. And we don't want to be again a part of the new Union, where I think we can see a lot of problematic issues with bureaucracy, where we can see the problems of Islamophobia, where we can see xenophobia. How can we deal with that if we have the same and other problematic issues? Both sides have their homeworks, and in this way we can help each other. We can bring to our countries mutually understanding way. How can we do that? The day before yesterday, I already spoke about that. I think that time has come to understand that we should change our vision, our attitudes to each other. And I can give you, at the end of my very short remarks, one example. I'm already made about that, made this idea. About the tolerance. Tolerance is a priority as a value within the Europe and European institutions especially. Everywhere we can hear that we should be tolerant, we should do this, we should take into account. But tolerance in some cases means that I'm not so happy with you, but I have to be together with you. I'm so happy that in the previous presentations, in the speech of my friends, I have heard a lot the word respect. We should change the vision from tolerance to respect. And this is the way how can we survive in this very difficult surrounding. We should respect international law. We should respect each other. We should respect the values of each nation. We should respect diversity. We should respect the choice of the nations. We should respect the future of our common territory. And that's why, from this point of view, not only with this value, but with other values, we should think very seriously. And in this case, we will be much more closer to each other, even without the membership within the institution than we had before. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now I want to introduce Mrs. Maria Soraya Rodriguez Ramos, and she is the chair of the Joint Commission for the European Union of Congress of Deputies of Spain. The floor is yours.
Dear colleagues, first of all, let me congratulate the Parliament of Georgia for organizing this international parliamentary conference. Thank you for invitation. Gives me the chance to participate in this discussion with all of you. As you know, Spain has always and continuously supported Georgia's sovereignty and territorial integrity. And today, I would like to convey our gratitude for the official expression of support to Spain on occasion of the events recently in my country. Thanks. The European Union and the other member countries of Eastern Partnership have already come a long way of cooperation and joint work. The Eastern Partnership has been a clear step forward, has strengthened European Union relations with the 6 countries involved, and has allowed to set up positive multilateral and bilateral cooperation mechanisms. Spain has always supported this Eastern Partnership. In the last Eastern Partnership Summit on 24th of November, we reinforced our commitment to continue progressing in this strategic and ambitious partnership based on common values. We recommit ourselves the strengthening democracy, rule of law, human rights, and fundamental freedoms, which are at the heart of Eastern Partnership. As President Juncker has said in this summit, the Eastern Partnership is first and foremost a partnership of people. It is about improving lives in all countries, about bringing our societies closer together. In this sense, I want to highlight that of the objectives endorsed by the last summit was a substantial new support package to youth and education. We know the benefits of Erasmus program for Spanish students, and we wish the same advantage for the countries included in the Eastern Partnership. This program will contribute, as it has done for state members of the European Union, for making young people more active, critical, and responsible citizens, and also for building young leaders. I also want to highlight importance to advance gender equality and no discrimination, will allow the Eastern Partnership to take full advantage of the economy and social potential within their societies. There are other important projects also decided in the last summit for a stronger economy development, and better market opportunities, for stronger governance, strengthening of institutions and good governance, fight against corruption, for stronger connectivity, for a stronger society, increasing mobility of, and contacts between people. The Eastern Partnership is also fundamental for the European Union foreign and security policy. A clear example is Georgia. The participation of Georgian military troops in European Union lead-based operation, Mali or the Central African Republic, had made Georgia an important European Union partner in the fight against terrorism and organized crime. All these objectives are a roadmap to deepen our partnership. The strengthening of European perspectives, such as a reinforced Eastern Partnership, must face one complex situation for the European Union. The European Commission has presented a white paper on the future of Europe, which has generated an intense debate. The white paper analyzes how Europe shall evolve in the coming years, the impact of new technologies and employment and society, the globalization, the security policy, and the rise of populism. This debate, this intense debate, is taking place at a moment special after Britannic referendum. For the first time in our history, we are not facing negotiations to enlarge the European Union to new countries, but for the exit of its partners. I want to leave time for debate, but let me finish my speech congratulating Georgia for organizing this conference and reaffirming Spain's support the Eastern Partnership. Thanks.
Last but not the least, Mr. Dolidze, who is the State Minister of Georgian, European and Euro-Atlantic integration. Recently we made a statement, we are very sorry that not the minister, because there is no minister, but the position of the minister will go. But we very much hope that the Minister of Foreign Affairs will give us more details on how this agenda will be advanced through the ministry. So, Mr. Dolidze, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Katie. Always good and easier, to be the last speaker. All has been said, actually, but I will try shortly to deliver my thoughts and views. First of all, I would like to also join my colleagues in thanking of the Parliament of Georgia for this conference, and especially Tamuna Moldova, who was initiator. I think the time also has been chosen very adequately, particularly after the Eastern Partnership Summit. I think that 2017 for the European Union itself was crucial, was quite tough, taking into account the challenges and threats what we all are facing. And the debates and broader kind of consultations on so-called raison d'etre for EU is still underway, which is a very important process. And I want to truly believe that strengthening of the Union and strengthening of security of the European Union will affect the whole European security, the part of which Georgia is, and our contribution and our participation into those operations, which has been mentioned just recently, is crucially important. And Georgia is one of the most, let's say, enthusiastic countries in terms of cooperation with the European Union. We have already quite success stories, I would say. As you know, association agreement and DCFTA entered into the force, and we started smoothly, I would say, implementation process and monitoring of the implementation. I think that in that respect, parliamentary oversight and parliamentary role of the parliament is crucial and should be crucial. And I think that in that respect, EuroNest Parliamentary Assembly is doing a great job, and I'm really very happy to be among my good and old friends within these delegates. On another hand, you know that Georgia started free visa regime with the European Union and Schengen zone, and it was not only kind of practical, concrete deliverable, but it was huge political, I would say, step forward in terms of the future political association, economic integration, people-to-people contacts, and strengthening of the mobility with the Union. At the same time, Georgia has become the full-fledged member of the European Energy Community, which is also another step forward. And last but not least, Georgia is one of the most active participants of Eastern Partnership process, and I think that it gives us more and more opportunities in delivering of our homework, in delivering of our internal efforts and internal reforms, which is #1 priority for the government of Georgia. And last but not least, territorial integrity and sovereignty of my country is #1 priority for Georgia. And all the instruments which has been delivered on 2020 documents is really very good opportunity for first time, on one hand, reformation process in my country, and on another hand, more attractiveness of Georgia for the people who are beyond the so-called ABL, and they also should be the part of this process. We are talking about the more SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, more investments, and here was mentioned new investment fund, which has been actually established at the Eastern Partnership Summit, and this initiative is crucially important for us. You know that itself, Georgia is doing a lot of job, and this is not about money only. In that, I really agree with Sergi. This is about more, you know, not only trainings, but more kind of involvement of European partners within the reformation processes, and I'm really very happy to see that all deliverables, all initiatives from the both sides are very much in line with the Georgian government's 4-point priorities, which is about good governance, which is about spatial development of the country, which is about infrastructural development, and #1 priority is that education. And I'm really happy that these deliverables are giving us more programs in all those spheres which has been mentioned. And we are doing the great job in that respect, I think. If you will look on the numbers, what has been done after 2012 and what was been done before, I mean, difference is really huge. Of course, we appreciate what has been done even before, because we have to applaud this kind of reformation process in the country. But believe me, last 5 years was really successful in all terms, starting for democratic processes in country, and of course infrastructural, educational, etc., etc. So we have not to spare time, we have not spared this energy, and that's what we are doing. As you know, that very soon, actually 21st of December, I guess, one of the biggest and one of the deepest ports on the Black Sea, Anaglia, will launch and building on this port. On another hand, we're going to finish until 2021 east-west corridor, so-called highway in Georgia, and it will be one of the main elements of our infrastructural and spatial development, because this is about more investment, this is about more hotels, this is about more kind of spaces, and of course employment, which is one of the biggest problems, and this is not about Georgia only. At the same time, we are thinking very seriously, and we're going to start our work on roadmap, and this also has been mentioned yesterday at this conference and today as well. I think this is very important to know what are the next steps, what concretely, after those achievements which has been mentioned, and where we are going to. Is this about circular migration, more mobility, screening process? So I don't know. One of the main elements, of course, will be, and still is, implementation and monitoring of the implementation, proper implementation of the association agreement. Nothing is perfect, nobody is perfect, and including Georgia, but believe me, this process is going very well. And if I believe that you saw the implementation of 2014 and 17, and now we adopted just very recently association agenda with the European Union for next 3 years, in 17 and 20. And I believe that until 2020, Georgia will have the new reality, including in terms of our future association, and not only association, but integration into the European Union. Because we all know that NATO and European Union are the final goal, and full-fledged membership of Georgia is the final goal of the Georgian government and the Parliament of Georgia, and I am not shy to tell it. Last but not least, I want to mention strategic communication, which is one of the main elements of the working of my ministry. I think that this is a very important tool of internally with our society and externally with our partners. You remember that visa liberalization campaigning, which started even before the 28th of March, before the launching of the process, was very good. And the feedback which we get was very impressive. I think that more than 95% of people know what they have to do for free traveling to the Schengen area and EU zone. At the same time, they know what they have not to do. There are some violations, there are some gaps, of course. I mean, it always happens. But basically, the process is going very well, and we have very good experience, which we are sharing with our other partners, including, for example, Ukraine. The same we are doing for European EU popularization and NATO popularization, particularly in the regions inhabited by the national minorities. Because you know very well that Russian propaganda is working, very unfortunately. They are putting a lot of resources, a lot of money in NGOs, in mass media, in television. This is not a problem only for Georgia and this region, as you know, including political parties, very unfortunately, but tackling with propaganda with anti-propaganda, this is not a European and, let's say, civil kind of methods of tackling with this threat and challenge. That's why public awareness raising is #1 priority for us, and NATO Information and EU NATO Information Center, which is at the ministry, is doing the great job in that respect. Last but not least, your question, Katie, it's a good question, of course, because, I mean, all these budgetary support programs, strategic communication, implementation monitoring, and by the way, we're going to start in beginning of January, electronic monitoring of the implementation of the association agreement and DCFTA is not an easy job. And this kind of merging of two ministries, I think that conceptually this is the right step, and I do not see any problems if the management will be the proper. And I'm sure that we have, and the portfolio of the Minister of Foreign Affairs is quite huge, I think, and very, the leverage is quite high, and we are always stating that European and Euro-Atlantic integration is not only foreign and security priority of our country. This is internal priority, this internal political priority, and first of all, we have to deliver internally in terms of reformation of the country. So I do believe that this young, energetic, and very knowledgeable minister will manage, on one hand, to do and to continue his job, what he is doing before, and on the other hand, to be #1 watchdog of the implementation process of the association agreement. This is a priority for government. This is a priority for the parliament, and parliamentary oversight will be very fruitful for us. So I'm very, let's say, optimistic in that respect. Again, thank you very much for this very timely and substantial discussions, and I will stop here, ready to answer your questions. Thank you again.
Thank you, Victor, and thank you all the speakers. I'm very glad because they covered all the topics, from talking about very specific instrument, considering accession instruments, to political, then parliamentarian efforts, but also energy and transport, investment, and strategic agreements. And basically we talked about like almost all four freedoms. And also one aspect that I want to talk a little bit more, it's a contribution or the question I think that I will pose, but I will also let others pose the question. But my question would like contributing to these modalities. Can we afford this? Because we're talking like it's not about money, but at the end it's about the money of the taxpayers, both in European Union and in Eastern Partnership countries. And can we contribute to this instrument? And if we can, how we can also communicate to our citizens? Because finally, as you said, the Minister, it's all about like who will benefit from it, and it's about citizens benefiting. And right now, as you mentioned, all of you mentioned, it's about political and financial support. And when, again, we ask through the surveys, the Georgians, they would expect more financial instruments also, investments, not the financial, but more investments, and how they can benefit from investment. But we also understand that we have to contribute because accession countries or the member countries, they also contribute with their taxpayers' money. And one other thing that was lastly mentioned, it's also one aspect that a population thinks that it hinders. It's of course the rule of law, but also the conflicts. And not all the, I think almost in all the Eastern Partnership countries, there's some kind of a conflict, either between the countries or with one country that is neighboring all of us. So if you can comment about again, how can Eastern Partnership afford to be part of these modalities, not just getting something, but also contributing. And the second, to comment about the conflict and how the EU can help with different instruments with the peace building. And now I will also open up the floor for the participants so that if you have questions, and then I will ask the speakers to respond to all the questions together.
Good morning, or maybe already good afternoon. Thank you for excellent presentations. The recent political events in new countries and the fact that you started to discuss the future and the changes of in the EU, and just recently, a few months ago, the EU Commission has presented the 5 scenarios of future of EU on the Rome summit. All this show that there are obvious internal problems, let's say rather challenges, let's hope that it's challenges just in EU. That makes European Union quite introvert for the upcoming future. So given these circumstances, I would ask all panelists actually, do you still think that there are prospects of full-fledged membership for EU countries in the upcoming future, or the economic and trade relations, deeper trade relations, as well as security relations similar to EFTA countries is the only option for the nearest future?
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yes, please.
I have a general remark. I don't have a particular question addressed to anybody, but anybody can answer. Listen to all the panelists here. If you are a poor country, then we talk about money, then we talk about economy, we talk about support, we talk about help, we talk about tolerance. When we're talking about Azerbaijan, that is economically fine in comparison to the rest, then you have the vocabulary of respect and not just tolerance. We give something, we want something back. So you see, you have two narratives here. But if we want to think, and what exactly we discussed yesterday, and I mentioned, if we have to respect each other, We have to tell the truth about ourselves, the truth about EU, and once we deliver this truth and we make it public for the society to see what we are doing on our own yard as a homework, then EU member countries will reveal what they are doing. Then we have to think about something beyond why EU was formed in the first place. Sure, it's about money, but if yesterday we talked about the biggest peace project after the two bloody wars, and if we think about at this beyond just money, then we will have respect or beyond tolerance. So you see, we have to think just beyond helping each other or tolerating each other. If we speak about the truth and we reveal it to the public so the society understands, then I don't think that we will have these two narratives with regard to who is helping whom. Thank you.
Thank you. The lady.
Thank you. My name is Lolita Sigan. I'm chair of the European Affairs Committee in Latvia. And I would like to comment on the point that has been made several times here about the apparent weaknesses or confusion on behalf of the European Union. It probably was indeed so that after the Brexit referendum, there was some soul-searching and some questions as to how to proceed. But actually, everything after that has been a really very strong show of unity and of understanding that only together we can have a sustainable future. And actually, the European Union in this time has launched several very, very successful projects. For instance, we refer to the migration crisis of 2015. If we look at the numbers, it has been successfully tackled. The powers of so-called Frontex, the border guard agency, have been strengthened. Just recently, EU launched an action to have more coordination in the field of defense. Our colleague from Swedish Parliament yesterday talked about the new initiatives in the social dimension of the European Union. And I would like to again say that actually the European Union is an incredibly powerful institution and an incredibly powerful bloc. It is understandable that having this organization of 28 countries, there will always be issues, and there will be always problems, and there will be always challenges. But it has actually shown a very, very successful collective action in these times, especially when so many people and political parties and politicians advocate for bilateral ties. And I believe that also the Eastern Partnership Summit was a success, and I've heard it on many occasions from also Eastern partners. And the fact that the EU was not carried away by new projects, new ideas, new challenges, but was able to focus on the Eastern Partnership and was able to sign an agreement with Armenia, give concrete, tangible goals that need to be achieved with the other partners, is actually a sign of open door, a lot of understanding, and the time will come when further signals will be given. I think that it was extremely encouraging to see that the rhetoric of the President of the European Commission, Juncker, changed when it comes to the enlargement. I'm very happy to see the West Balkan representatives here, and they have a clear perspective. And this is not in doubt that if you do your homework and work hard towards this goal, the same perspective, when there is a window of opportunity, will also open for the Eastern Partnership countries. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
I have to press, okay. I have the question to the representatives of so-called, let's say, candidate countries. Sorry for simplification. The question is, which of the reforms you find necessary and very useful for your countries, and you enter it with enthusiasm and, let's say, determination, and which fields of reforms you find required only by acquis communautaire, and you must do it, if you can develop this a little bit.
Thank you. One last question, and the organizers are already telling me that we're over time, but we started a little bit late too. So yes, please, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. This is not a question, actually it's a comment. I would like to thank you first of all for very interesting comments, what is very important, very close to the main challenges we have. I would like to continue the point which Mr. Kapanadze mentioned actually. This is the instrument IPA. Because problem is actually the distance between the political distance from the EU and correspondence of this distance with the instruments supporting each the country. I think when IPA was formed, actually, a lot of things have been changed since that time. And the new generation association agreements, if you look inside, level of the integration of the legislation and other elements of the integration, of course, deserves more assistance. Fund which there's a new idea regarding the formation of the fund, of course, the wonderful idea, but I don't know how this fund will be successful in terms of delivering reaching the final destination of the beneficiaries, but IPA already has the very concrete instruments how to reach the final beneficiaries. If we take from the different dimensions of the problematic issues, of course, economy is the number one. Within the economy, real sectors development is an issue. We all speak about the development of the real sectors, but in the context of our challenges, being the part of the free market-related philosophy, engaging into so many free trade agreements, and having such a balance, which our country has, of course, development of the real sector is the number one. So I think basic message which we have to deliver to the European Union is that IPA can be already extended to the associated countries as well, because we have all preconditions to put in place this request. And this is one of the message which I would like to consider as one of the consensus regarding this context. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Because we ran out of time already, I would like to ask the speakers, because I promised. So again, to go this, and in a half a minute, just to respond to one of the questions or make a comment. I understand we won't be able to respond to all the questions, but we will continue this discussion outside, and we still have the need to, maybe we need an entire day or a week to talk about these specificities and about all the questions that were raised here. So Sergi, I'll start with you.
Well, since there's a short time, I'll just maybe pick up the point on the conflicts. I think if we ask a question, what more can be done with regard to the conflicts? From my perspective, there are two things which could be changed. Once again, I'm talking about the substantial change, not about the concrete minor modifications of the policy. The first one is about the upgrade of the level of political talks about Georgia-Russia conflict. And I think, once again, you know that I'm a big supporter of Geneva talks, not only because I was a participant in it, but because I think it's a good, inclusive, wide format. But the problem with that format is that unlike the Ukrainian conflict-related formats, the level of the talks is not high. The highest level in that format is the deputy ministerial level, whereas what we probably need with regards to the conflict resolution is the higher presidential or the head of the state or government level, or even the ministerial level. And unfortunately, we do not have that from either side, either the participants or the parties to the conflict side, or the side of the mediators, European Union, or the other parties. And the second point, I think, where the substantial upgrade is needed is also the resources that the international community and Georgia together are spending on the conflict resolution. If you contrast how much money Russia is spending on Abkhazia and how much money we are spending, and when I say we, I mean together, Georgian and the international community side, you will see that there's a huge disbalance. The main money that Russia spends goes directly to the pockets of the Abkhaz, and they see the linkage with Moscow, whereas the main money that we spend, I don't think actually trickles down to the concrete individual, and even if it does, the publicity around it is not such that it is conducive to the transformation. Thank you.
Please.
Half a minute time, very challenging, frame. So I'll try in a very, very short manner to answer several interesting and important questions. If I'm not wrong, this wording belongs to Winston Churchill, that if someone will see in problems only difficulties, others will see new opportunities. This is exactly the situation with the President of European Union. We do not have doubts in the future of EU. In a very clear and sincere manner, while saying that, I don't make some nice political declarations. This is my belief. Our aspirations remains unchangeable. The forms, the internal organization of EU also could change in the future. The most important for Moldova is the following fact. We would like to join EU because we have the same aspirations, we are sharing the same values, we are introducing, we are working on the European models in our society, economy, social sector, because those systems proved their efficiency. Those models are without alternatives for the European country like Moldova is, with citizens with European mentality. This is one side. Second side, I don't know what happens exactly, I'm not an expert in Caucasus region, but in our region, the question is put in the following manner. There is a hard geopolitical fight. If we will not apply those methods, will not go towards EU, believe me, another union will catch us. Because those are the two ways. Third way, not possible. Or one, or second one. I'm pledging for the European way of my country. And by the way, here, while speaking about combating anti-European propaganda, let's be very frank. This anti-European propaganda is efficient, because a lot of money is invested here, and people working in that direction is very gifted. I will tell you just one example from my country. We can spread information during 6 days of the week about new roads, new schools, new children's garden, deliverables, very concrete for our population. And on Sunday, it's enough to have 5 minutes a TV reportage on Russian TV about molested women in some country by immigrants, and the police was not very efficient. And believe me, these 5 minutes will erase the effects of 6 days. This is why, in a few months' time, in my country, in Moldova, we'll apply restrictions for TV, blocks of news, and talk shows coming from the countries that didn't ratify the European Convention for Cross-Border Television. It will not be individual approach, it will be a principle put in a very serious manner. This is absolutely necessary among other issues. So I have many other things to be said, but okay. Last point, it would be not fair if being here in Tbilisi and not to thank Tamar and not to thank Victor Dolidze, because I took the chairmanship, the co-presidency within the Parliamentary Assembly from Georgia. I know him during many years. He did a great job. So thank you very much for this very important contribution.
Marian finished. What I have noticed in the years is that you have, despite the changes in the leading political forces, in Georgia we see always very committed young people who are sometimes inspiration for us who are already in. because I feel that sometimes we value less our membership than they value the Union itself. So thank you for that to Victor and Tamar as well. On the issue that Marian mentioned, yes, anti-EU propaganda is very efficient. We sometimes feel that whatever we do is quite evident and people understand, but sometimes it's very easy to distract the attention, and it happens in our countries as well. And I guess that in countries like Moldova, Georgia, Ukraine even, it's even more difficult to counter that. And having said that, I believe that the situation within the EU is much better than it looks like sometimes because of this anti-EU propaganda, and I fully subscribe to what my colleague Sigane mentioned. Now EU is much stronger, it's going upwards, but the fact is that it would take some time in order to how can I say, to reach the new equilibrium. I think this is important, but we learn how to react, how to respond, and I see a much more united Union now, by the way, paradoxically, but the Brexit has made us more united and showed us the strength of the Union. And here I have to mention that there is a huge difference between the Soviet Union and the European Union, if I may oppose to my Azerbaijani colleague, because Bulgaria was not a member of the Soviet Union, part of the Soviet Union, but at that time we had less political choices and less ability to influence process than now being part of the European Union. And it might sound maybe a bit idealistic, but yes, we have our voice and it's being heard if we are able to defend what we feel important for our country. And I think it was not possible in the past in different circumstances. And finally, on our Macedonian colleague, well, it's true that, of course, we should not talk only about money, but we should also avoid having too idealistic view about the Union and generally about the world nowadays. Every country who is part of the EU or wants to be part of the EU, of course, has to obey the basic principles, democracy, freedom of media, freedom of speech, human rights, and so on. There are a number of issues. Of course, there are countries that do not feel this is so important, and we cannot impose that, and we should not. We have to respect the choices. And that's why I finish by saying that I value very much the fact that in the past several years, EU has evolved from trying to squeeze all countries of the Eastern Partnership into the same policies. Now having this differentiation, I think that makes things much more realistic, much easier. And those who want to come closer, we have to be able to welcome them. Those who want to keep distance and select certain areas of cooperation, they're welcome. And maybe one day they have the ability to change these policies and come closer. And for the others, the other way around. But it's a matter of respect. I fully agree with that. We should not impose anymore. And we should communicate, discuss, work together, and find the best approach to every country which is in our neighborhood. Thank you.
I will be very brief, and thank you very much. First of all, I think that the Eastern Partnership Summit in Brussels could be estimated as a very efficient, positive, and why? Because from my point of view, we, first time in this kind of summits, we saw a more pragmatic approach, first. The second, respect to all 6 Eastern Partnership Program member states, and withdraw some ambitions which European Union has. From this point of view, I think very important to take into account that today we can see within the European institutions realistic approach, not political approach as we saw in the past, but realistic approach. And with this realistic approach, that would be much more easy to bring to ideas which European Union has. And the second point is, that we are, of course, today in favor to establish all kinds of relationships with European institutions. But for time being, bilateral relationships, much more efficient and efficacy within this bilateral relationship could bring us to much more result than within multilateral, if I may say, cooperation. But this doesn't mean that we absolutely exclude multilateral cooperation. As you know, Azerbaijan is also taking part in the program, which could lead us to signing the agreement with European Union, but in a very care way, in a very special way. And I think, from this point of view, we are in a little bit different situation, because we today, as my very good friends just mentioned, we are coming to European Union with our ideas, contribution, and with our great economic potential, and looking for European standards. But this is for us, for time being, for us much more important than to be a full-fledged member of this organization. And my last remark, I've never compared European Union with Soviet Union. I'm talking about unions, because each union could withdraw some kind of liberty from the state. Thank you.
Et pour l'avenir de l'Union européenne, comme j'ai dit, la Commission a présenté un livre blanc où présente 100 scénarios. Et qui sera, je ne suis pas, parce que l'Union européenne, en ce moment, est en plein débat. Mais l'Union européenne est un projet solide et très fort. Et la construction de l'Union européenne a toujours été comme ça. Discuter ensemble pour aller à l'avenir ensemble. Mais en même temps, et c'est très important, il y a une forte volonté politique de renforcer les partenariats orientaux et les partenariats sud. Les politiques de voisinage est très, très important pour l'avenir et pour les projets de l'Union européenne. Ah, c'est parce que je réponds en français, excusez-moi. Oui.
Yes, there was a translation.
Il y a une traduction, alors tout va bien.
No, there was a translation.
Merci.
Yeah, thank you.
It's okay with microphone? There was one question from the gentleman about the priorities. As I said, we have 4 main priorities. This is in the 4 main kind of sphere of reforms, which is really crucially important now for Georgia to be successful. As I said, this is education, infrastructure, spatial development of the country, and good governance. And I'm really very happy that this is fully in line with the association agenda, all 20 deliverables which has been delivered actually in Brussels on the last EAP summit, and we're going to continue this process. By the way, very soon we will open the new European so-called school in Georgia, which will be within the Eastern Partnership process. Actually, it was a very good initiative of Commissioner Hahn last year, and this project also will be launched very soon. And this is Georgian contribution as well. When you're asking about the contribution, this is a very good question. Of course, we also have to contribute, and we are doing so, including the projects which has been mentioned, for example, my Azerian colleague and friend. I fully agree with him. I mean, this is Azerian contribution, this is Georgian contribution, and very happy that the Turkish as well, because this trio, which is doing, I mean, this East-West corridor, is a crucially important, including last project of Baku-Tbilisi-Kars, of course. And finally, I mean, we are very actively are in close touch with our partners in Brussels who are representing the agencies. We identified and made a new database from which agencies we are working now and which kind of new priorities can we have. And this database actually helped us very much in our deliverables, which has been prepared before the summit, and we handed over, I personally, to Director General Danielson. So these contributions also it's mutual, and I fully agree with you. Thank you very much again.
Much, and I will finish with the note that in 2 years' time, we saw that when we are asking Georgian population who is benefiting from these processes, from this instrument, they're saying it's a political elite. And in the last 2 years, we also get with the free trade, we got the businessmen, and with Erasmus Plus, we got the students. So they see more and more groups that are benefiting in the process. So I hope that with all the instruments that we explored, there will be more groups that will benefit from the process so that they really feel that they're part of this process and part of the transformation where EU is helping us. Thank you, and I'm very sorry again for running over time, but it was very interesting discussion, so thank you, Mr. Speaker.